Hello guys, in this video I'm gonna show you and tell you what's my experience between the iPad mini 6 and the iPad 7th, but don't go away because it's iPad 7th, because what I'm about to say is that it applies to standard iPad as well, even to the updated iPad 10th, because I think the deal breaker and the real difference between the two, between the iPad mini and the iPad, it's the size and Apple Pencil and the UI and the things inside instead of the outlook. So let's get into it. So I get this iPad from Apple 3 years ago and I use it every day. I love the machine, and the thing for me, I think the difference between the two, because I recently got this iPad mini 6, it's not about it's faster or something like that, but because of how portable it is, and I can hold it in one hand, but I don't want to hold it on one hand because it's just too heavy for a standard iPad, and for the size and the weight it just feels right. And as you can see, there's the UI difference here. Even though they show the same icons, the gaps and the pattern between everything is different, so it's more compact and cramped together on the iPad mini. But on the other hand, the iPad is so spacious. I would say I don't like spacious because it's unused space to me, and it's well utilized to me. So even though it's showing the same thing, but it can be shown on a smaller screen, but it's still larger than an iPhone. So it's about space utilization. I think it works better on the iPad mini than the iPad, what I would use usually. With the iPad, I would just let it sit on the table or sit on the bed with a stand. I don't usually carry it around me when I go out because it's just kind of too heavy and the size is too big. And for the iPad mini, I can put it in the sling bag, and it's so lightweight and carry it around. Okay, it's enough for the weight and the size. Let's jump to the actual working feeling difference. So as I mentioned, there's so many padding, and when I go to the web browsing, as you can see, actually the iPad mini shows a little bit more thing. You can see there's 3 columns and then almost 4, and on the iPad it's about the same, 3 columns, almost 4. So the viewing real estate, it's actually pretty much the same, but of course the text on the iPad, standard iPad, is larger, easier to see, but it's smaller on the iPad mini. But it depends on each person though, because I would prefer iPad mini more over than the standard iPad, because I can view the same thing on a smaller device. Why would I want to hold a larger device? Okay, so let's go to another page, and as you can see, the iPad mini, it's noticeably smaller, and the chairs on this iPad is bigger. But is it too small? I think it's alright, but it definitely doesn't show enough room for the iPad mini because I cannot reach the text over here. But when you see it over here, you can have everything clearly but I would usually just use it in landscape mode. That's the way I can see everything. But when I do the landscape mode here, there's basically no difference because I can see it on portrait mode as well. And also if it's landscape mode, the words tend to be showing a little bit bigger on the iPad mini, but not on the iPad. So when I search on Google, it would be like this with so many gaps and use the space on the side. Even when I read it in landscape mode, but on the iPad mini, it's just right. So the space is not so ridiculously large, as you can see here. It's basically saying the same stuff in the same, almost same size, but way smaller device. So I don't think I can read so many things at a time. So my eyesight usually just can contain only this size. So every time I scroll, I just tend to click on the first one, click on the second one. So the iPad mini does the job for me enough. So I don't need to get so big of the iPad. Another thing that I would want to show you is the PDF, viewing PDF size, because that's something that people concern about. That's what I'm concerned about. And as you can see, it is a full-size PDF, so they're showing the same page now. The text on iPad is of course bigger and more clearer, and the one on the iPad is small, but if you have good eyesight, it's completely okay. So I would prefer the iPad mini more because of it's portable. I can read the PDF while holding it, but I won't read PDFs on the standard iPad because it's just too heavy when I'm holding it. So I will only let it sit on the table with the stand instead of holding it. So it actually makes me want to use it less. But with the portability on the iPad mini, it makes me want to use it more. It's clear to me, but if I want to actually read it with larger text, I can just hold it on landscape mode. As you can see, it's way bigger here. And when you do landscape mode, it's bigger here as well. But the difference is not that big comparing the iPad to the iPad mini. If you flip it around, the size, the text size here is almost similar, but the difference between the portrait and landscape on iPad mini is significant. On the iPad, not significant enough. Okay, so here is the split screen for viewing 2 PDFs at a time. I would say both are too small for a split screen. Both devices are not suitable for using split screen. It's just too small. But of course you can just zoom it in and zoom it in to view both things at the same time. I've never really used split screen on the iPad with my 3 years of use because it's just not practical. It's too small. What I would do is I would just view one PDF on the iPad and type my notes on the laptop. It's always my preferred way. Or I would just minimize on one side, and I start taking notes over here with the keyboard, so the virtual keyboard won't take up so much space, and I can still view my PDF here and while typing my notes. But on the iPad mini, it is way too small. I would say it would be possible to do so, but I wouldn't want to. I would just view the PDF like that and type my notes on the laptop. It's just way more functional. And the distance between the tip and the monitor is big comparing to the Apple Pencil 2 to the mini. So the actual difference, it's the writing experience is better on the iPad mini, and I've experienced some very minor delay when you draw on the regular iPad with the Apple Pencil first generation. It's not pleasant, so I tend to not write or draw on it with it. But on the iPad mini, I would like to use it more because the writing experience is much better, and because of the size again, I can hold it on one hand and draw with the other hand like holding a notebook. But with the iPad, I wouldn't do so because it's just too heavy. Even though the screen is big, it's not big enough for me to do split screen. Even though the screen is big, it doesn't show more content that my eyes are capable of. Even though the screen is big, it's not big enough like an iPad Pro that shows an actual size of A4 size PDFs. So I would say the iPad standard original, it's somewhere in between the iPad mini and the Pro. So if you do a little bit of both, maybe you get the iPad. But if you are productivity oriented person, I would say you should either get the iPad mini or the iPad Pro. But generally, I would just suggest you to use iPad mini because it's just way more optimized even within the app. So I know sometimes when you encounter some apps that only have phone user interface, so it's always in portrait mode, you cannot do it in landscape. But on the iPad mini, it's still pleasant to use those apps because it's more like a phone size. It's still portrait and the ratio is correct. But if you use the phone app on the iPad, it would be ridiculously large, everything. And if you remember, there is a button that you can zoom in and out, which is not usable, but on the iPad mini, it's very usable. And I enjoy using iPad mini with those apps comparing to iPad. And also I figured that with the iPad mini, it can replace many of my things that I do on the iPhone, because I have an iPhone SE, which is a small device that when I do message and web browsing and everything, that I want to be portable to while doing it. The iPad is not it. it's portable, but it's kind of still too heavy, so I need a place to set up a place to use the iPad, such as on my bed or on the table. But the iPad mini, I can use it anywhere. I can carry it around, I can just hold it on my hand. Another thing, it's important to me, is the typing experience. The typing experience on the iPad mini, it's so much better. So if you use iPad and you try to type it, your thumb cannot reach the middle part even if you hold it with two hands. So in portrait mode, it's very hard to type. You can, however, type in landscape mode with both hands. I think it's very proper to do it. It's precise for me to type as well. It's more like using a laptop typing experience, but you have to do it on landscape mode and on the surface. So because your iPad is laid around here. But with the iPad mini, it's very comfortable for my thumbs even go to here. So with both hands, I can type just like using an iPhone or regular phone. And even in landscape mode, it's just like the iPad on portrait mode. So it's still very reachable with my hands, and even with the landscape typing with both hands is also great on the landscape mode. But I will usually just use iPad mini in portrait mode while typing, because in that way the virtual keyboard won't take up so much space. I barely see anything here, but when on iPad, you can see more, but it's just not easy to type on. So that's it. I think I've covered everything almost. So I hope you enjoy this video and find this helpful. See ya.